We are ready for the Freddy. I love a parade. It's Gridiron 360 on this crisp Thursday morning. Thank you all for joining us and listening in as we're going to preview Week 9 of the college football season. Got my man Dave with me.
Hello.
As always, I am Bill. We're going to run down the games of this weekend. It's crunch time. Well, crunch time's already come and gone. Now it's sudden death in college football. Literally. A loss could mean you are out at this point in time. Yet there are still some teams with one losses hoping to squeak their way into the back door. All right. We are going to start with a game tonight. Undefeated and sitting in the AP poll at number 16 is the Southern Methodist University Mustangs. SMU 7-0. They're going hop, skip, and a jump over to Houston.
Yep.
The Cougs. Less De'Aaron King, who is sitting at 3-4 right now. Maybe a little unexpected, but with the loss of the superstar quarterback, I guess that's just par for the course why they sit at 3-4. So the Mustangs are heading over to Houston to take on the Cougs. Houston has been a little bit of, obviously not as, like I said, not as great as we thought they probably could have been. But De'Aaron King's not playing. Start of the season, they come out. Who they have? Oklahoma that they are, or was Ohio State? No, it was Oklahoma.
No.
Pretty sure it was Oklahoma. They had a game with, and that it was close.
I believe that was the first week, but then they also played Washington State. That was another big game they had early on.
Right. Now, if you this is when they had De'Aaron King.
Mm-hmm.
That game ended up 49-31 Houston. So, as you look really through Oklahoma's schedule thus far this season, that was really the closest game they've been in. Well, they had the one with Texas, I guess. That was 34-27, but keep in mind that touchdown Texas put on to make it 27 from 34-20 came late, more like a garbage time type thing. So, the reality is early in the season, De'Aaron King was there, Houston, Oklahoma. It was a little bit of a dogfight for Oklahoma. They came out victors.
Well, what was interesting in that game, too, is it kind of followed, if you'll remember, it followed the opposite of the script we thought. We thought Houston would really make it a game through the first half of the game, and then Oklahoma would pull away, and Oklahoma scored a bunch of points early, and then Houston whittled their way back into the game.
Right.
It was kind of the reverse of what we thought was going to go.
Early on in the marriage between De'Aaron King, the quarterback.
Yep, and Holgerson, the coach.
And the new head coach, Dana Holgerson, coming from West Virginia. We did a lot of talk then about, them kind of working out the kinks, working together because it wasn't as high potent of an offense, at least the first half, that Houston had been. And I think that was kind of attributed to Holgerson coming in and trying to put his stamp. He's an offensive-minded guy on the offense. And once they kind of worked out the kinks, then off and running they went.
Yep.
And made it more of a game in the second half, just as you said. The whole reason I say that is, Houston, not a slouch. Now, unfortunately, they've, like we said, De'Aaron King's not there.
Corbin, I believe, is the back that's also redshirted. And that really came to fruition because they had the loss, obviously, to Oklahoma, which was expected, but still they played them tough. Then they had the loss to Washington State, who we believe was a much better team, kind of played down this year. But then it was the Tulane loss in week 4 that caused them to make the changes. So it's not quite as strong of a team as at least from a talent standpoint at this. So there's a big shift on that team since then.
Right. So we say all that to say is, well, hopefully they can give a little bit of a game to SMU. It'd be nice to see, a fun game tonight if you're watching college football rather than NFL. But, it'd be nice to see Houston to stay in this game. Now, all the credit in the world here to SMU. I really think the coach they have there has done a great job. And, to be honest with you, they a couple weeks ago, they're a non-Power 5 team, take on a Power 5 TCU team with a very good head coach and defensive-minded guy in Gary Patterson, and they beat them 41-38. closer game than really a lot of the other games they've played. But again, that was the one team out, a Power 5 team out of their conference they took on. So credit to them for having that on the schedule. It is in the state, so it's not surprising.
Yep.
But yeah, they took care of that, and outside of that, for the most part, they've handled their business against everyone. The first game of the year, I think it was the first one, maybe. They had Arkansas State, was it? I think it might have been. And it was 37-30. So that was close. But outside of that, they've handled their business against everybody else.
Yep.
And done what they needed to do to have them undefeated and at number 16. They still have some games in front of them.
Yep.
They do have Temple on the schedule. It is at SM.
No, they beat Temple
last week. That was the one they beat. They have Memphis on the schedule. That one is on the road. And then they have Tulane at home at the end of the year.
Well, they also have Navy on the road. You want to always be careful with service academies. Navy right now is got only one loss on the year, one in conference, but that's no slouchy.
No, and that is in Annapolis. So. Yeah, what do you think, man? I honestly, I think that this could be a good game. It could be a lot closer. I think, from what I've seen thus far out of SMU, that they can pull this one out. Yep. But it might be a little bit more of a dogfight than they expect, or maybe they expect it.
Yep.
But, they're going to have to strap it on and get going. Houston is one of the teams left on their schedule, I think, that has the ability to knock them off.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I mean, well, look, the simple fact is they're in the AAC, and they can only play who they play. But Memphis is a scrappy team. That is the one loss Navy's had, so that's going to be a tough game. So in this game, it's hard to tell for Houston to lose. Probably it's two of its three most dynamic players, to a red shirt.
Recover from.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, to lose a quarterback, the future quarterback of Florida State. Oops, did I say that? I think I did. De'Ara King's going to go to Florida State. You heard it here first.
But
he's redshirted. He's going to be a graduate.
Okay.
Just keep that one in the ear hole for a little while.
I'm okay with it. You got to have the coach to coach him, though.
Well, Kendall Briles. That's his former coach. So we'll see. But anyway, no, this is. We could use them. God help us. Our quarterback.
Use Urban. I know you hate that.
Now, they've already crushed that, and I don't think Urban would sniff
I saw
us.
there was inklings of it, and then they crushed it, and then I saw there was more chatter that actually is not crushed. So we'll have to see.
Well, yeah, but here's the thing with that is, well, we'll get into that later.
We'll
get into this game. I think SMU their tough games are on the road. So coming up, so this is a team that's. Wants to hang in there. I think, you've got talent on this team, and they're scoring points. It's good to see. I mean, this is, if you know anything about the history of SMU, the one and only team to get the absolute death penalty. Was that the late 80s, I believe it was, like 88, 89, I think they got.
Was it late? It might have been like 80,
mid-80s.
Yeah, it was roughly the same time.
They were paying some guys.
The Pony Express.
Yes. This is a guy, they got a quarterback, a former Texas quarterback, not Texan, Texas quarterback, Shane Buechele.
Texas. Yeah, Shane Buechele.
Yep.
Scooted up the way.
Yeah, so, after he was losing out his job to Ellinger. So, this is a team, again, they can score points. I think this is a game they win, and it's going to be interesting to see. I think they beat Memphis. This is a team that could see a top, what is it, the New Year's Six bowl games.
Yeah.
They're definitely in line for this right now. I would say them and App State are fighting for that, and so they've got to take care of business. I think it's a game where they do it. I just think they've got the horses. I watched a little bit of the game before. They did go to overtime against Tulsa, so I was a little bit suspect on their defense. But I have to be honest, that's probably the only game where I've watched. I will say a large enough chunk to see something, but and because they've had some tough fought games, like you said, you mentioned the TCU game, 21 points against South Florida, who's pretty bad. So you're just never really sure. I think Memphis is a very, very good team. I hate playing service academies if I'm anyone because they're disciplined, but I don't think this is the game where it gets done. I think Houston's got just too many challenges offensively right now.
Yeah, and I mean, it'd be nice to see them run the table and go to a New Year's Six bowl. You know, a team like that, like you said, that got the death penalty. It was so long ago, and now especially with the paying of players, you know, California signed the bill. It's not going to go into effect for a few years, but you know, a lot of the stuff that happened back then is now becoming something that could potentially be okay to do, be a norm.
Yep.
And you know, it's just, man, I mean, if I was, you know, a grad from that time and a fan now and seeing what's going on, I mean, it's kind of a slap in the face.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's, you know, 20, 30 years too late. But regardless, you know, good for them if they can run the table and get a New Year's Six bowl, and we expect that they will continue on this streak, at least for this week.
Yep.
Next game, and we are running through undefeateds and big games here.
And SMU Houston is tonight. It's Thursday night game, so it'll get going before the weekend.
Yep. And then tomorrow at noon, you have also undefeated sitting at number 21. You just mentioned them. Appalachian State. They take on South Alabama. What are they? The Cougars.
Yeah, I got to tell you, they got quite the schedule, South Alabama. You know, I know they've got Florida State upcoming, but they've also played. I think they played Nebraska.
Nebraska. They've had to have Memphis.
Yep.
Because I believe they're in the AAC too, aren't they? Or are they Conference USA? Might be.
They're Conference USA.
Who else? I think Louisiana Lafayette they have on the schedule. Who, if I'm not mistaken, the Raging Cajuns. They're pretty good. I'm looking 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I mean, like the only team that Louisiana Lafayette has lost to this year, they lost 2 games. One was to Mississippi State, and one was to Appalachian State.
Yep.
And the game against Mississippi State, they lost by 10, and the same one against App State. So they've only lost 2. That's ahead on the schedule for South Alabama.
Yep.
But let's talk about App State.
Yeah, I mean, this team, they've got South Alabama this week. I won't say that South Alabama's
they're 1-6.
Played a ton of teams tough, but they are willing to go and play. But, you know, App State's, you know, they've played some tough games. They played Louisiana Monroe. If you'll remember, I remember them well. They gave Florida State a hell of a run for their money. You mentioned Lafayette. They beat them 17-7, so it was a close game. But their biggest win of the year was against North Carolina. You know, a North Carolina team that had been playing pretty well up to that point and has played decent this year.
Beat what 21-20?
Yep. Yes.
And they beat North Carolina on North Carolina's turf.
Yeah, 34-31.
Yeah,
yep. And they've got upcoming games. You know, they play. They get Georgia Southern after South Alabama. Then they get South Carolina.
Yep.
So, you know, they don't. And then they get Georgia State. And if you'll remember Georgia State, well, let me just say, call Tennessee. They remember Georgia State.
That they do. They do. And the reality is, you know, Georgia State, I think they're like a hair over 500. Maybe a couple. It looks like they have like 1, 2. Oh, they only have 2 losses. As far
they're
as
5-2.
So
yeah, 5-2, and on a 3-game win streak right now.
Is at Tennessee.
Yeah, so you know their road is not easy either.
Oh, and they beat Army.
Yeah.
You just talk about the service academies. Army was one of those dark horse sleepers that people were talking about potentially getting into a New Year's Six bowl, and hasn't worked out that way this year for Army. Quite the opposite, but still a tough team to play, and they handled them.
The one thing you've got to be, and I think this is critical for teams like App State and SMU, and you talk about service academies, beating service academies takes discipline.
Mm-hmm.
If you're disciplined, you should be able to beat them because, you know, one of the things that's really interesting about service academies, I don't know if people know this, but when you go to a service academy, whether it's West Point, whether it's Navy, you are required to play 2 sports. I had a friend that went and played hockey at West Point, and he was
David Robinson.
Yeah, you're required. It's a requirement of
that. What did he play besides basketball? Do you know?
That's a good question.
I'm
gonna have to
look.
I'll look it up.
Keep on your chatter.
But so these guys, and let's just be honest, these guys are future leaders of the best military in the world. So and you talk about a place you need to be disciplined. It's there. So they are, you're never going to get it easy. And you can beat them because you're going to, a lot of times you're going to outsize them. You're going to be more athletic. But you got to be able to do it on the field. What's neat about App State, obviously losing their coach, who we've talked about quite a bit, in Scott Satterfield, heading to Louisville. So, so to be able to maintain that strength that they have is very, very impressive. I like what they got going. I am very, very interested to see them play South Carolina. If they win that game, that's going to be, taking on UNC, taking on South Carolina. They'd have a very good shot at running the table, and I think they also would then be a extremely viable New Year's Six team.
Yeah. It's, again, we all know I'm a homer for Clemson, and we get South Carolina at the end of the year. I have a question. So, even though App State is undefeated, and if they go through the schedule undefeated and beat South Carolina, does that strengthen us going to play South Carolina or weaken it if South Carolina loses to App State?
Well, I would say this. I would say I think it's really kind of flat either way, and here's why. There's a boost in the sense that, App State's an undefeated team and ranked. We're not talking about – they're a ranked team, so meaning the AP feels that this is one of the top 25 teams in the country. So losing to or beating them is not a slouch. So I don't know if it's that – South Carolina's not. So, App State would – my bet is they will probably, on a Vegas sense, not be a favorite in that game. But the idea is, if the voters are right and they believe that they're a top 25 team, then they should win that game, right? Again, you got a road game, so the spread might not indicate that. But in the end, I guess what I look at is if South Carolina wins, that probably strengthens their schedule somewhat. The simple fact is I don't think anybody's going to give Clemson the respect of winning that they probably are due. And I think it has less to do with South Carolina App State situation than it has to do with the ACC as a whole. And we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about some of the conferences and where the standings are for the conference title games. I think there's actually more critical games for Clemson in order to improve their strength. But I would say, I guess maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I wouldn't say it's flat. I would say if South Carolina wins, that helps. They beat a ranked team.
Okay.
And South Carolina beat Georgia, so that probably actually helps if South Carolina wins for you guys.
Okay. All right. Well, this App State South Alabama game is a nooner on Saturday. So there's a couple other games at noon. One of the big ones of the weekend that you'll probably be tuning into, but maybe just keep an eye on the bottom line, see what's going on there, and check out the highlights when you can.
Yep.
Next game, Oklahoma, seated right now in the AP poll at number 5. Cinque, as our Italian friends would say. They're traveling to Manhattan, not New York City, Kansas, to take on the Wildcats of Kansas State, baby. Now, Kansas State is a far cry from the heyday during Bill Snyder's era. And I say that because he was there recently, and they haven't been as good as they were in, his heyday.
His heyday, yes.
His heyday. I think that he did that quick year retirement and then came back. I think it was prior to that were more the heyday.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see in here? This is a nooner on Saturday as well. Do we have any shot at seeing someone give a game to Oklahoma?
The eye test says no because of the way Oklahoma's playing, but let me just say this. You're talking about a Kansas State team that's got 2 losses. They lost to Texas at home, 19-14. It's a close game. And I know you've really come off of Texas recently, but I don't think you can deny. Texas has played 2 top 5 teams and lost. And neither game was totally out of hand. I felt like the Oklahoma game was less close from the eye test than the LSU game. But they also lost to Baylor, who is also in the list of undefeated, 37-34. It was a close game in Baylor. So,
but outside of that, no, they lost another game.
I'm sorry. They did. They got waxed by West Virginia.
Now, am I seeing this right? Is West Virginia ranked 20 in the AP poll?
This is weird. This thing's saying, though, that K-State is 4-2. That is not accurate. And this is on the NCAA board. How is?
We are screwing with your mind, people. Are you going back to last year?
Am I?
No, they are 4-2, buddy. They're 4-2 going.
Maybe I'm looking at last year's games. Am I crazy?
Yeah, well, you might have scrolled up too much. But look, I'm looking
cheated.
I'm looking.
All right,
at
let me
now. Yes.
Restart.
We're in 2019, bro, not 2018. So
I'm all the way to the bottom. What's going on?
No, you went too far up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Let me get into you here.
I did. Okay, I lied.
Listen, they had Nicholls State. They blew them out. They had Bowling Green. They shut them out. They had Miss State on the road. They won that game. They had Oklahoma State on the road. They lost. They had Baylor at home. They lost. They beat TCU last week, and now they have Oklahoma coming to their house.
Yeah, my apologies. Totally misread this. Yeah, I knew they had played Baylor. That's why it made sense when I looked at it quickly.
Baylor beat them up pretty good.
Yeah, it was 31 to 12.
Well, yeah, that was the biggest loss. They lost to Okie State 26-13.
Yeah. So either way, I guess again, you're still you're a 4-2 team. I like I said, I don't think the eye test says that they will give them a game. Listen, I wouldn't have said Illinois was going to give Wisconsin a game, and right now, like, this is where the chaos happens. And K-State's, whether they've been there or not, they've played enough big games. It's a conference game. They're not a pushover. They may not be great, but they're not a pushover. So Oklahoma's going to have their helmet strapped on every game from here on out.
Yeah,
because the pressure's going to be on.
They're like us right now. Everybody's Super Bowl.
Yep, and I like. Don't get me wrong. I love what Oklahoma's doing right now. I think they are a playoff team right now. I don't think they're a number 5 team in my mind. I think they're a playoff team. If we had to stop today, if I was a voter, I would vote them in. And that is with as good of the rest of the teams that are above them as there are. I still think that they are a top 5 or top 4 team. But they got to prove it. So I think they're going to win it. I think they'll get some points scored on them in this, but I think it's going to be Oklahoma will pull away, and it'll be decisive.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm looking down the defensive rankings right now. It appears that statistically that Kansas State sits at number 40 overall in terms of defensive stats overall, the best defenses in college to date. Oklahoma is at 28. So, and Coastal Carolina is at 27. All right.
Coastal Carolina, folks.
Coastal. Josh Norman. We'll move on. I mean, look, there's not much to talk about here. I agree with you. I think Oklahoma will handle their business, but don't get surprised if there's a little bit of a game. Yes, there are upsets. I don't see that happening here. But again, you mentioned it. We said that we don't see that. We never saw the Wisconsin-Illinois coming. Folks, that's the great thing about college football. Mm-hmm. Every week matters. Anything can happen. That's why we preach so much on the fact that coaches are imperative to college football teams because these are 18 to 22-year-old kids. And they've got a lot going on, and it's not just football. And, they're impressionable, whether it be from their peers, their coaches, their parents, their family, the media. Mm-hmm. And that can really affect the way these young men go in and play a game, whether it's a good team or a not so good team, and it's up to that coaching to have them on the right track. So for all intents and purposes, I think that Lincoln Riley will have them where they need to be, but anything can happen.
Yep.
So, again, this is a nooner as well. I'll be flipping over to check this one out much more than maybe the App State SMU's the App State game. But again, there's another big one on at noon that I will be zeroed in on. Let's talk about it.
All right, you've got number 13 Wisconsin, who we were just speaking about, coming off a brutal loss to Illinois. The great part that we talked about in that game is, as bad as that loss is, they're in it. They can control their own destiny. Now, Their road is brutal, but they can control their own destiny in that sense. Now, one thing I find very interesting is, you're talking about right now in points per game and yards allowed per game, so total defense and scoring defense, you are talking about number 1 Wisconsin versus number 2 Ohio State. Wisconsin's given up 7.6 per game, Ohio State an even 8. Yards per game, 193, almost 194 yards for Wisconsin, 229 yards for Ohio State. So defensively, both these teams can hit you in the mouth.
Wisconsin is number 1 right now in total defense.
Still, yes.
Ohio State's number 2.
Yes. Yep. So that's very interesting. Now, Wisconsin was one of the better running teams. Ohio State is the third best running team at 288 yards per game. Wisconsin at 235. Their points per game, they're both top 10 in scoring. Ohio State about 10 points better at third, with Wisconsin in 10th. So you kind of see these two teams are relatively matched in the style of game that or the style of the way they've won this year. Here's the interesting part, and this I find very interesting. And you've talked in one of our podcasts about recency bias.
Mm-hmm.
So as you know, Vegas lines are not predicated off of where the score is going to be all the time. They're predicated off of splitting the betting action. And what I found very interesting is this is a home game for Ohio State. They are a 14.5-point favorite against the number 1 defense in college football, which to me is kind of crazy. And on top of that, the betting is 70% to Ohio State covering that spread.
Wow.
And to me, like, that screams recency bias, because if they would have won that game against Illinois, what do you think? What would you think a spread coming out would be against us? I gotta believe it's less than
7?
a touchdown. Yeah,
Less, 6, 7.
Yeah, like I would think that. So and that includes the 3 points to the home team. So I've seen what Wisconsin can do. I think Illinois. It was very much like the Clemson North Carolina game. Tough things happen. The ball falls right for another
Were they
team.
looking ahead.
Yeah,
to this game?
looking ahead. I don't see that. I don't see 14.5 points at all. Like I think this game is going to be way more of a battle than what they're giving them. But here's the great part. This is something we said prior to the Wisconsin loss to Illinois. We had yet to see the Wisconsin quarterback, and though we have a lower expectation of him versus a Justin Fields, we've yet to see them really be put under pressure. At that point, Justin Fields at this point has still not been really tested. He hasn't had to do more than his game plan. He's not really had to show a lot of progression in his passing game. This is a game where I think he's going to have to, and so we're waiting to see, because Ohio State certainly has looked, and we've said it several times, as the most complete team in the country, but we want to see that test, and I think this is a test. I mean, if they cover 14.5, I don't know how they're not number 1. I don't know how they're not number 1. I don't. I just, as good as LSU and Alabama are, nobody has looked as complete as them. If they can go out there and cover 14.5, and Justin Fields can throw the ball in this game consistently and show us that he can go beyond his one read that he's been hitting, but he hasn't had to. So I don't want to knock him. I mean, you hit your read, and his guys have been open. That's good. That's what I'm looking for in this game. I think it's going to be a tough fought game. I think it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping we'll get what we expect. Whether the loss motivates, which I think it does, motivate them a little more in Wisconsin, or doesn't, this is a game that I think everybody was circling on the calendar after week 3, 4 as okay.
Once both of them started murdering people.
What game, because, and merely in my mind, because Ohio State has looked so dominant and so complete, and the knock has been, well, they haven't played anybody or haven't faced adversity, and everybody circled this game as the game where we expect to see some adversity, and how will Ohio State respond? Now for Wisconsin, they got to get it done.
Yeah, there's just no way around it.
There's no slipping up. This is win or go home, unfortunately. 2 losses, especially at this point in the season with the season we're looking at, is not going to make it happen. And look, this game could be a rematch in the Big Ten championship.
Very well could.
You know, and so what could happen there? What if Wisconsin loses this game? They're still very much capable of getting to the Big Ten championship, because the only team I think they're going to really have to battle out with is Minnesota, and they yet still will have to play.
Yeah, but Minnesota's going to have to lose twice, though. That would be the only
true,
challenge.
But if you look at Minnesota's schedule, the next 3 weeks, three out of the next 4 weeks are going to be the toughest part of the year.
Yep.
So, and
I think
like rolling the
that's
boat.
true for the because understand after Minnesota plays this week, we'll talk about their game. They got Penn State, then they got Iowa, which Wisconsin still has Iowa
Where
too.
is that game?
Which one? The Penn State one?
The Iowa game.
The Iowa game is in Kinnick, so they got
Feel
that.
about Kinnick.
Yeah, so they've got Penn State. Like really, the Big Ten. Scheduling gods were with the Big Ten because they have made the end of October through November. I mean, everybody that's good has to play each other.
It's going to be must-see TV.
Yeah, I mean, 3 of their next 4 games after this week are against ranked opponents.
Yeah, I mean, look, don't get it twisted. There's a lot of chatter about the Power 5 conferences, where they stand comparatively to each other. You could put the Big Ten, if they're right there with the SEC. I wouldn't even argue with you if you said right now, as a whole, the Big Ten is doing better than the SEC.
And here's what's also interesting about it is
depth-wise.
You've got both sides of the conference with dominating
not just
teams.
one,
yeah, which
you know?
the SEC's the East is
better than expected.
Better than expected. I don't know, because Georgia was supposed to be the class, and they've kind of shown. So Georgia's kind of come down a little bit, but Florida's really moved up.
Missouri takes the loss to Vandy. They were ranked in the East Side. You know, maybe that's a fraud. I don't know. Here's some things I do know. Total offense in terms of where we stand right now in the country. Ohio State sits at number 5. Wisconsin sits at number 37. Okay. Rushing, okay, because what we've seen Wisconsin do is be awesome on the ground with Jonathan Taylor and those big uglies. Wisconsin is 17 in the country. Number 3, Ohio State. Rushing. Now, a lot of that has to do with Justin Fields, but don't get it twisted. They also have J.K. Dobbins, okay?
Yep.
In terms of passing offense.
And Dobbins, it's not like Jalen Hurts in Oklahoma. Dobbins carries a vast majority of the workload, and intentionally. It's not like Justin Fields. I mean, Justin Fields runs a lot, but he is not. It's not as designed, I guess I'd say, as like in Oklahoma, where Jalen Hurts is their top rusher.
Right. Now, here's an interesting statistic from passing offense this year. Okay, Wisconsin, not really. Cone has done what he's needed to do when called upon, but it hasn't
with the exception of Illinois when he threw the pick. That's his only real blemish in the season.
Wisconsin sits at number 89 in the country in passing offense. You want to guess where Ohio State sits?
I got to figure they're top 20.
How you jest. 66.
Really? I would.
How about a shocker there?
I'm surprised.
That's kind of shocking.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's because I see Justin Fields run the ball, so get some running plays that maybe he doesn't put up the big. And truth be told, other than last week with Illinois, these two teams have not had to throw the ball a lot. That's how dominant they've been in their other games.
Sure. Now, despite all those things I just rattled off, I think this could be the deciding factor. The statistic. I don't mean to just drop a bunch of statistics or rankings, but I'm just trying to paint a picture.
Yeah. Well, you've
the
got
listeners.
two very similar teams, so you got to have the difference.
So you try to find where the chink may be, where one may have the advantage of the other. Ohio State sits at number 5 in the country in third down conversion efficiency. Okay, Wisconsin 37. And that right there is the biggest discrepancy I see that could possibly come into play this week. Okay, because, again, Jonathan Taylor has been the guy for Wisconsin, but if they get in third down situations where it's up to Cone, whereas if Ohio State gets in third down situations and it's up to Fields.
Fields has 2 options.
Exactly.
That's a big big advantage in this game. Yep.
So I'm real excited. Do they have a line on this game? Not that we call.
14.5.
14.5. That's right. You said 14.5. So I expect. I quite frankly, because these teams sit at what did I say? 1 and 2 defensively.
Yep. In total defenses and scoring.
I think it might not be as high scoring as you think.
Yep.
At least if Wisconsin wants to stay in this game, it better not be.
Yeah, I mean,
but they can control the ball on the ground, and that's where they can get to that point. the points down, control the game, control the clock, keep the offense for Ohio State, off the field. My biggest concern is you got the number one defensive end in the country and the number one corner in the country on the defensive side of the ball for Ohio State. I'm actually more concerned about Okudah at corner than I am Chase Young because, if they're able to run the ball effectively, they can run at, away, or whichever way with Jonathan Taylor and try to neutralize Chase Young a bit because he is the best defensive end in the country, but he's an edge guy, so he's coming off with heat. So you could try to neutralize him a bit, and Jonathan Taylor's a load. However, if they do have to get in those third down situations, and it's up to the quarterback for Wisconsin, Jack Cohn, Jeffrey Okudah he's going to be seeing ghosts, and his name will be Jeffrey Okudah.
Yep.
And that is the matchup, I think, from the studs on Ohio State's defense that is going to really have an impact in this game. So I think I don't even know. I don't know who's going to win the game, man. I want to say Ohio State. I feel like that's just they are the most complete team now. I don't think they're going to lose the game. I do think it'll be a closer game, certainly than that 14, just because of being able to control the clock on the ground. Wisconsin can, but Ohio State has looked like the most complete team, and I'm in agreement with you. If they cover that spread against this team, then they should be number one.
Yeah, I probably a big part of this game, and I'm trying to look it up to see where they are for field position, but its starting field position is going to be critical.
Absolutely.
Especially early on.
Teams are going to be, but that's another thing that Ohio State's pretty good at. They've got a good punter, man. They are pretty good when it comes to their special teams. That's why we've said complete, because they've great on offense, much better than they have been in past years on defense, especially with two of the top players in the country, and their special teams has been very good.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking through it. It looks like Ohio State has one of the better. If I'm following this, some of these advanced stats get a little muddy. Has one of the better field positions. So, but the thing that's going to matter in this is if all of a sudden you don't, can you put together those drives of that length? And the one, and you kind of mentioned this though, that's very important. It's the third down conversions. I think is huge. And I would also say big playability through the pass certainly favors Ohio State, which that's, again, field flipper. Can you flip the field? And I think right now Ohio State has a noticeable advantage in that ability, and that comes down to the passing attack. Mm-hmm. It's going to be curious. I'm curious to see the game plans because even though these teams are both designed to just get up there and pound the ball against you, they're also built defensively to stop that. So that being said, who tries to go for those home run balls and what are the results? Ohio State, what I think, we've said this before. What do you pay for in the NFL? You pay for four positions. You pay for quarterbacks, left tackles,
well,
and on
right tackles is getting close.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
But tackle.
We'll say tackle position, and then on defense, you pay for D end and you pay for corner. Mm-hmm. And I got to say that Ohio State has the advantage on the defensive side in those two positions. They have probably the best D end in football, or at least a top 3 D end, and probably I think it's at this point the number 1 corner in the country.
Yeah, he's badass.
Yeah. So
he's badass.
That's the great part about this game is even though they are so evenly matched in similar parts to the game, it's probably going to come down to a piece outside of that's going to make the difference in how this game starts to roll. Because then the challenge becomes if Wisconsin gets up or if Ohio State gets up, how do you change your offense to play catch up in this game? And that's going to be interesting. So yeah, this game I'll be turning it off at the commercial.
That's right.
That's about it.
So this is we have really 3 big ones on the slate. This is the first one. Don't miss it. It should be one of the, better games of this season. We've seen a few of them and a few that have been surprises, but this one is, we certainly hope it's going to turn out to what we expect.
you will need several bags of popcorn for this week.
Yeah, man. I mean, like, look, it's if Ohio State struggles and still gets the win and doesn't cover, there's no fault to them. They still could potentially be looked at as number one after it. But what we're looking for is them to face adversity. They need
both teams in that matter.
Well, Wisconsin did,
but they failed the test. Yeah, they failed the test. Though.
Ohio State has yet to face the adversity of any sorts, or be down in game, or struggle, and we need to see that because they mentioned it on I think there was a top 25 college football show on ESPN. And like regardless of how good, we just said. The Big Ten, you could potentially argue that it's as good as the SEC at this point in time in terms of overall conference,
no doubt,
strength and the depth. But they said it last night. They could roll through their whole schedule undefeated, win the Big Ten championship, and still go to the playoff and not be prepared to take on a team they're about to take on.
Yep.
Okay, because though these teams in the Big Ten are great, there is maybe outside of Penn State who's a little more speedy and athletic than before. Most of the style of Big Ten is very similar. And when you go up against a Clemson, LSU, and Alabama that's athletic, or even Oklahoma that is, can strike fast too with a good defense, is it going to be that big of a shocker to them because they really have handled their business or confident going in after running their conference out of the building? Are they going to go in with, high head on their shoulders and then all of a sudden get slapped in the face with a team that is able to go toe-to-toe with them?
Yep.
So we'll see, but that's why, again, the whole point of me saying that is let's see some adversity for Ohio State, how they respond, and can they come out of it.
Yep.
Next game, my friend, it is actually the second of the three biggins that we're looking at this weekend. Number 9, the Auburn Tigers go to Death Valley and take on the LSU Tigers. And LSU sits right now at number 2.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 3:30. Is this the CBS, I presume?
Yep.
Look, only because game day is going to the North Dakota State, South Dakota State game, which they kind of do some of these fun ones during the year. That's probably the only reason it's not a night game. And to be honest with you, that's good for Auburn. Not that it's good to have to go any which way, but night games in Death Valley have spelled doom for no matter who goes in there. This is this could create chaos, and I'm not expecting LSU to falter, but we kind of, before we flipped on the mics, we said, what if Auburn wins this game? And then what if LSU goes and beats Alabama? And then what if
Alabama beats Auburn?
And then what if Alabama goes and beats Auburn in the Iron Bowl? You've got a isht storm.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, you would knock Auburn out in the sense that they'd already have 2 losses, but think about this. First of all, Auburn has to play 3 top 10 teams in the next 5 weeks, including number 1 and number 2, as we stand today. They have already played Oregon. This is a team that could potentially have played in their schedule 3 playoff teams.
Yeah.
What a schedule.
What if it
And they played Florida.
What if it goes this way? Well, no, because Auburn has the loss. But still, what if Auburn were to lose this game and then Alabama beats LSU and then Auburn beats Alabama? They're still going to have the 2 losses, but it's still going to
there'll be a 2
things up.
It is, but it would probably be for the other teams. I mean, I think realistically Auburn has to win out just because, again, they're carrying that 1 loss that they had this year. I think this is I don't know. I just think there's so much interesting about this.
So tell me, give me some of your interesting points, because I got some too.
All right, so you've said this many a time, and I completely agree with you that you are probably talking about the best defensive line in college football.
Yep. Despite the Florida loss, man, they didn't lose. I mean, that game, their defensive line was all over the place against Florida.
Yep. Yeah, and this Now, granted, LSU is tested against Florida, which is a very good defensive front for them. So they're battle tested in that. That was a game that went back and forth. What'll be interesting, Florida was able to keep that offense out of rhythm, and that's why they won that game. LSU has given up some points to some teams. And so if that game gets in rhythm and someone is able to, and again, we talked about this, the best way to beat good pocket quarterbacks is to be able to rush 4 guys and get to the quarterback.
They can absolutely do that.
When you start bringing pressure against good passing quarterbacks, they tend to find who you've gone off of and find those plays. And Burrow's been showing that he can do that, like no doubt this year. Certainly a front runner for the Heisman as well. So can Auburn do that and create some disruption with 4 guys against a team that teams have not been able to do to this point? And in turn, because LSU can give up points at times, can you get a guy like Bo Nix who can get you on the ground, and start to chew up some clock on you and get you off balance? Because LSU's really, I'm trying to think. I mean, really, they never really played from behind other than when it was 28-21 against Florida, right? I think they went down by a touchdown at that point. They were always up a touchdown until that last one. I think they were down 28-21.
Got close at points, but they
had the lead early on. So, and then obviously then LSU got Florida in that game at the end, and then took a couple of scores in at the end to take the lead. So it's a team that hasn't really struggled throughout a game being behind. They've had one point where they've been behind that I remember, other than maybe a first drive. So Auburn is the real deal. Like, this is where everybody's all baked up, and I'll admit it, I am too, for a 1 versus 2 Alabama LSU game. But I'll tell you, ask Alabama about 2013. I mean, Alabama was rolling everybody and ended up getting Auburn in the Iron Bowl. And if you remember the plays in that game, I mean, they just kept it close, and they won with, return kicks. They run with fumble recoveries. That's what this team still can do. That's who they are. So this game is going to be interesting. It is possible LSU could get rolling quickly and score some quick points and make this game, a little bit of a blowout, but I would not bet for that. I think, and this is an Auburn team that's very battle-tested. Very battle-tested.
Absolutely.
And I don't know.
I mean, look, we know that LSU has had some big games. A lot of people are saying they've had the toughest schedule thus far. I think that Auburn is right there with them, man.
Yep.
They're right there with them in terms of who they've played and how it's gone.
Yep. Yeah, so to me, it's all going to be about, if I was to look at this game, I would say, can Auburn get some luck early to score some early points, and can they get to Burrow and get him uneasy in the pocket with 4 guys? That, to me, is the game right there. Because what you don't want to have happen is, if you don't get to him with 4 guys, he'll pick you apart a little bit, and LSU's running game is no joke. So if they can then start to run the ball effectively, because now you're going to start to bring more pressure, and maybe they're running away from your pressure, that's going to be the challenge. But I think if there's a team in the country that's up for that, it's probably Auburn.
Yeah.
I think their defensive front is more deadly than Alabama's going to be able to give them. Alabama's game should be different in the sense that they're both shoot it out through the air, which is not your mom and dad's LSU. But these teams are different. So that's what's going to make this exciting to me.
Yeah, I'm just scrolling through because I was curious, and I don't even see LSU on here. Oh, there they are at 79 in the country rushing the football. Auburn is 11. 11th in the country at rushing the football. Now, here's the key, and I'm just trying to see if I can get an update. Auburn's running back, Booby Whitlow, Jatarvius.
Booby.
No wonder they call him Booby. He got injured. What was it? It was back towards the beginning of October.
Yep.
And it was a 4 to 6 week injury. So that said, I don't think that he's going to be playing. Now, he's been out the past several weeks already, and they're still sitting pretty high in their rushing offense, so they can do it without him. But he's the guy, man. If somehow he's able to play, I think that's a huge boost. But I don't think he's going to be able to get back for this game. I mean, he had knee surgery, so it's not like the whole ankle situation with Tua or Mahomes or Saquon or whatever you want to talk. I mean, it's like this is going to be a little bit tougher, and it looks like the next guy in line is Cam Martin, and then behind him is a sophomore, Sean Shivers. So, it really would help them to be able to rush the ball. But I agree. I mean, like, this is going to be – it's much like at the beginning of the year when Auburn and Oregon met, and we said the big matchup was the veteran offensive line for Oregon and the stud defensive line for Auburn. This is similar, not in the sense that it's LSU's offensive line versus Auburn's D-line, but in the sense that it's going to be Auburn's D-line's impact on the game that will make the difference. Just like in that first game, whichever one of those, the offensive line for Oregon or the defensive line for Auburn, whichever one succeeded was probably going to lead to victory. And that's kind of where I see it, just like you said, man. Burrow, he is, just like you said. I mean, he's one of those guys that can maneuver the pocket. He does get outside, and he's able to sling the ball, but he kind of tries to stay in the pocket the majority of the time and move around. And that defensive line is going to come correct. They are going to come correct. I saw I do carpool for my daughter's soccer, and one of the kids that we pick up, her dad is a Georgia guy.
Yep.
And I saw him yesterday, and he looked at me, I mean, without batting an eye, said, Auburn's winning this weekend. No doubt. Auburn will beat LSU this weekend. And then he proceeds to say, and we're going to beat Florida by 21. I said, you're that confident. Can I put money on that? He's like, yeah, meaning Georgia's going to beat Florida. Okay. But he confidently was like, Auburn's winning this weekend. Now, take that with a grain of salt. That he is not us. Love you, but he's not us.
Yep.
I don't know that Auburn's going to win this thing as convincingly as he felt, but I am very interested in this one. The tough thing for me, here's the toughest thing for me for this game. It's on at 3:30, and if the Wisconsin-Ohio State game is still a close one, well, I'm going to be watching the end of that, and it'll probably leak right into this because that game will probably go a little further than the 3:30 start.
Yeah,
that's my biggest problem.
I got multiple TVs. But one thing I want to say, though, and you brought this up about where their rushing is. Right now, these are two, statistically speaking, are a tale of two teams. Auburn's the running team, the better running team by statistics, and LSU's the better passing team. But I want to say this, though. LSU has been more pass first. And just two examples, because they haven't played a whole lot of tough teams to this point. But if you look at their two, no. I mean, other than the ones we mentioned. So here's my point. So you go back to the Texas game. The Texas game, they only ran for like not even 100 yards, I think, in that game.
Yeah.
But they averaged almost 6 yards a carry with Edwards-Helaire in that game. So it was a little over 100. Sorry, I think I had just slightly over 100. So they could, but understand in that game, Joe Burrow went for 471. So they didn't have to. And then against, again, a very similar, not as good, but a similar front in the sense that that's a strength of the Florida Gators team. They ran in that game. Two of their three leading rushers ran for, let me see what, I had this right in front of me.
You need help? I got it.
Nope, I got it right here. So, I mean, they ran for more than 7. No, I'm talking about LSU.
Oh, LSU.
LSU ran for almost, I'm doing the math real quick. It's probably got to be close to 10 yards a carry against that front. So when you sit there and say, oh, they're low on rushing, they don't really have to a lot. They don't, that's just not the design of their team. But when they do, they get it done. So I mean, like, I don't want to be deceived by rankings that like they can't run the ball.
Last week they played in Mississippi State, and Edwards-Helaire Sorry. Yes. Clyde Edwards-Helaire went, let's see, he went 11 for 53, man.
It's almost 5 yards a carry.
It is.
And Burrow threw for 4 touchdowns and 327,
Yep.
and this game was at hand. And on top of that, if you remember in that game, what was there? 3 turnovers by their quarterback for Mississippi State. So Schrader.
Yep.
So you're talking about, again, length of field and all those things. So sometimes statistics will tell you a story. But I guess I just don't want to get caught up in the idea that LSU can't run the ball. And,
No.
and that's kind of my point is if they can get out on this team, it's going to create some disruption. They are definitely can be balanced on offense. I don't think they're going to go into this game trying to run the ball like crazy, but they might in order to slow down that front.
They might.
They might to slow down that front.
They
so
might.
there's a game within the game.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, my friend, and it'll be a good one. Again, the number 2 of 3 matchups we're excited about.
Hand
this
the
weekend.
wife the credit card. Tell her to go shopping for 7 hours, buddy. Well, maybe 10 hours.
Yeah, dude. It's because then it gets the third game that we're excited about, and it's not the Clemson game even though I'll be watching that. Is also in the evening, so it's going to be a full day of funness.
Yep.
Full day of funness. Yeah, this is great. 9 versus 2, 3:30 CBS. This is a good one.
Yep.
And you see one of your favorite phrases, let the chaos ensue.
Yes.
Because just the first these 2 games we just rattled off
Are guaranteed.
If things don't go the way they should for the teams that are higher ranked or the favored teams, definitely some chaos, and it's quite possible that can happen.
Well, here's the best part. I think even if the favorites win, chaos still ensues.
Well, yeah, because we can learn a lot about it.
Yep.
If there's some serious chinks in the armor, like they like to pick out every little nit out of what Clemson does, out of Trevor's flowing locks, then, they're going to only start. It's only natural that I'd hope that the media would start to do that if you see some chinks in the armor with these teams.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, let's jump to the next one. Not as studly of a matchup as the past 2, but still involving an undefeated team. My man, PJ Fleck. He's got the oars out, and he's rowing. Row your boat. And get yourself to 8-0, my friend. They are 7-0, right? They haven't had a bye?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Get yourself to 8-0, brother, because you got the Turtles coming to town. They started the season out on fire.
Yep.
Who is this team? They're a dark horse. They're going to go all the way to the college football
Got the
playoff.
Alabama coach coming over.
Woo!
Picked up some a grad transfer. Got a good recruiting class. And then
I played a few games and then
Temple showed up.
So you got Maryland going over to Minnesota. The Gophers are in the dome now, right? I know they used to play outside, believe it or not, in Minnesota. That's crazy to me because you get to this time of year and later, every game.
Did they move into the?
I think they moved into I don't think they moved into the Vikings Stadium.
They would have had to because they blew up the Metrodome, and when they blew up the Metrodome, Minnesota played at the Vikings played at the Gophers Stadium. I think they're still outdoors.
Are they? Golly.
Yeah.
That's something else, dude. Like anyone that's ever been to that part of the country, like you're talking, and I'm not even talking Chicago. I'm talking Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm talking, Minneapolis, Minnesota, specifically those 2 areas.
South Canada.
I mean,
because that's what Minnesota is.
Look, I lived in Montreal for a while, and I almost went to Marquette in Milwaukee, and my folks were living in Minnesota at the time. So I flew in there, and we drove over, and it was during the winter. And I've lived in the Northeast, up in North Jersey. I lived in Canada, in Montreal and Toronto. This place is by far the coldest spot I've ever been to in North America, both Milwaukee and Minnesota. I mean, it is the frozen tundra. Quick little story for you listeners that you might enjoy. When I went on that trip, because it's so GD cold there, obviously every car and every place you go into is just blasting heat.
Yeah.
Right? So we come out of our hotel, which is blasting heat. To go to the car, we were going to go check out this Mall of America.
Yep.
You know, this is a huge mall, very well known, like, you know, miles long, whatever. And, you know, you go from the heat of the hotel out into this freezing cold and then hop back into the car where you're blasting the heat. My nose goes from getting stuffy from the cold to getting into the hot car and starting to get runny. I know this might gross you out, but it's kind of funny. To then pulling into the parking lot of Mall of America to get back into the cold. And as I'm walking to the doors, I take a breath in from now my runny nose, now out in the cold, through my nose, and my fargid, I shit you not, my nostrils literally stuck together. And I was like, what the hell? I mean, dude, like, this is a place, if you decide as a man, you know what, I got to pee, there's no bathroom, I'm going to zip it down, take a leak, that shit's freezing on its way out of the pee-pee. Okay? This is some cold-ass shit. So to play football outside in this, not just now, but all the way up through the end of the season into November, that is just brutal. I'm not saying Maryland, if they are still outside, isn't used to cold. There's cold there in College Park over in Maryland too, but this is just beyond, you know, cold.
There ain't nothing colder than the Midwest, especially if you get wind. It's just absolutely the end of the world.
Cold. And I've been to Chicago during the winter, and it is damn cold. And you got the lake there. This is like a whole different level, man. We're not even talking about cold. We're talking about, like, you know, this is absolutely an ice cave. I mean, you walk out and you're walking into the restaurant freezer, man. It is so and that's even warmer than it is here.
Yeah.
I digress. Let's talk a little football. Yeah. How you feeling here?
Well, I definitely like Minnesota. I mean, Maryland with the way they're playing. You also mentioned the weather. I gotta look. I didn't look it up while we were talking because I was kind of looking at where they kind of stand some of the rankings wise. But I gotta believe they're still playing outside. I'm almost positive they are.
Okay.
You know, this isn't a team that's particularly prolific in any phase of the game. Yeah, you're not going to see them as like a top 10 defense, top 10 offense. They're pretty balanced all the way throughout. They're a middling 50, 60, ranking in the offensive categories. A little bit more of a rush-heavy team than a pass-heavy team, but still, they're averaging about 188 yards on the ground, which is pretty solid, and only 231 through the air. Their defense, their points allowed, yards allowed, they are 17, and points allowed, they're 32nd. So defensively, they're pretty strong. But their points per game is actually 18th in the country, even given those statistics. So what that tells me is their defense sets them up and their special teams for probably shorter fields because they're scoring. So if you see this right now, like I see them with an opportunity to give some teams some hell if they can get some good stops and get short field position. And I think this Maryland game, I think they win this. Their biggest challenge, as I mentioned before, is they play 3 ranked teams in the last 4 games after this. Yeah. So don't look ahead.
Yeah,
Minnesota cannot look ahead because there's a lot to look ahead to, and they can't afford to do that at all going through the rest of the year. I'd love to see them make some noise, do some damage. I don't know that I can really, in what I've seen so far and looking at the way their team plays, see them really being able to totally go nose-to-nose with a Wisconsin, an Ohio State, or a Penn State, but any given Saturday.
I agree. Here's where I feel more confident that they're not going to look ahead because they really haven't been there. They haven't been there. I think that I like PJ Fleck. He's doing what he was brought there to do, and I think he's a good coach. He's a level-headed guy. He's not like this super emotional, get too high, get too low guy, and I think he will keep them prepared to focus on the task at hand. Just a quick little note, it is outside. It's TCF Bank Stadium. It is outside. It looks like the weather this weekend will be nice. It says mostly sunny. Should be around 55 with maybe 10 to 15 mile an hour winds. So that's not too terrible for Maryland. They're used to that, at least this time of year. It's when it gets later in the year that it blows me away. But,
when the field's frozen?
Yeah, exactly. But I think that they haven't been here. I think that coach has them not just on a roll, but appreciating every week and every win, much like a lot of the teams that you've seen be successful in the past years and make it to the playoff do is just not stumbling where they shouldn't stumble and not looking ahead like Wisconsin potentially did. I don't think they're going to look ahead. I think they're going to, because I think if they do that, it's like you said, I don't know that they really can go toe-to-toe with a Penn State, Wisconsin, or even an Iowa on the road. Those are going to be really tough. So it's, in my mind, it's more like, let's go out and get ourselves to 8-0 right now. We'll worry about that later, man, because, it's not, it's just different that I feel like than Wisconsin looking ahead to Ohio State, because we know them to be powerhouses. They've been there before. This is a team that's starting to, their arrows pointing up, and let's keep on a roll and don't look ahead right now because quite frankly you might get scared or get down on yourself or be a little disappointed and being much more pessimistic than optimistic about the future. So let's just focus on what we got. Let's handle our business. And hey, guys, you know what? We win this game. We are 8-0, man.
Yep.
That hasn't been done there in quite some time. I think it's been like the 60s.
I will bet this. I'd bet I'd like a little prop bet here.
Okay.
That you could throw at somebody. What are the chances that they would actually announce the Ohio State-Wisconsin score at the Minnesota game to the fans, but more particularly to the team?
Let's see what time. So they're going to pretty much know.
I don't think so. I think they're not going to let the team know, because you think about this.
You don't think they'll put? I mean, like most colleges, like in between plays on board, they'll throw.
I wouldn't be shocked if they don't. You know why? Because you say to Minnesota, you say, listen, here's your simple motivation.
Good. I like that.
Just walking into the game, you can say this to your team, and this is how you get them focused for a game like this is, guys, do you understand you control your destiny now? Mm-hmm. You do, because you got Wisconsin beat. Now, here's what you don't want to do, because if you announce that Wisconsin loses, now Minnesota can afford to lose to Wisconsin and still get in the title game. Yep. And you don't want that. You don't want that focus.
Yeah,
so
they become complacent or relaxed.
And at the same time, you don't want to announce that Wisconsin wins. And if Minnesota's not playing well, then all of a sudden they start playing tight. So I would not be shocked if they kept that away from the team. Now, granted, kids with cell phones and all that, I'm sure they can sneak in scores.
Jesus.
But you know what? If he can control that, that is the type of thing you use for motivation. Other than one other game, they won't need the motivation to look ahead because they'll be playing a very good team.
Yeah.
But this is a team, legitimately, if Wisconsin loses, if Minnesota can make noise and go in that Wisconsin game, they could be guaranteed the title game without winning. And that's pretty impressive. So,
Can you imagine, again, like just there's
chaos ensues.
Yeah, man. I mean, what if they did make it to the title game unscathed? And what if Ohio State makes it to the title game unscathed? I mean, Minnesota will definitely move up from their current ranking of 17, but I still think if they're undefeated going into the title game against Ohio State in the Big Ten Championship, some way, somehow, I still could totally see Minnesota being ranked outside of the top 10. I still could.
Wait, so you're saying if they
both
if they
of them
run
go undefeated and they're going into the Big Ten Championship game undefeated, I could see, just for historicals and maybe lack of respect for the team, that they have them, and they might not be far outside the top 10, but they might sit at like 10 or 11. And, and what if then they go in there and beat Ohio? Who cares of where it is? But then what if they go in there and they beat Ohio? I mean, this is great. This is why we love this.
Yeah.
And I like what Fleck's doing there, and I wish them the best. They're going to go 8-0. They'll handle their business this weekend.
Yep.
Let's move on to the next one. This is actually another big matchup, not one of the big three we consider on our slate, but it's one definitely to keep an eye on. Also a 3:30 game and a big tenner. You got number 6, undefeated Penn State Nittany Lions.
Yep.
Traveling to East Lansing. Take on Michigan State. You got D'Antonio, though they didn't do so great against Ohio State. They did give them some fits early on defensively.
Yeah, here's my thing is I don't – this is where this game could get interesting. Is Penn State looking ahead to Minnesota the next week?
There's
you know,
no way
do they?
James Franklin allows
Yeah,
that.
well, I would have said that about Wisconsin too, you know,
Yeah, I
but
guess you're right.
Wisconsin, I mean, Michigan State is just fumbling right now, probably literally and figuratively. You know, after they really when they took that Arizona State loss 10-7 at home, they came back and beat Northwestern, then they beat Indiana, then they got rolled pretty good by Ohio State. It wasn't a total destruction, but then the week after that, they went and played Wisconsin and got shut out 38-0. And now you get your gift to that is you get Penn State. So you got the three top teams back to back to back. I don't see it in this game. I just think Michigan State, excuse me, has been exposed to where you can beat them, and I just don't think they've got the offense. Penn State not only can beat you with defense, but then they can grind the ball with football if they want to, and they got a quarterback that can throw the ball when he has to. So I don't know. This would be a big shocker in my mind. I just think Michigan State is not a good football team. I just don't see it. But they generally
they're 4
play
2 right now.
Yeah,
I mean they despite the losses.
Well, no, they're not 4-2. They got 3 losses. They lost to Arizona State, Wisconsin, and Ohio State, so they got 3 losses.
Oh, sorry, yeah, 4-3. Why was? Oh, I was looking down here. Yeah,
maybe in conference
2-2
they're
in the conference. Yeah, 4-3. This is jacked up. But
yeah,
I mean they're 4-3 still on the winning side. And look, if I were to look down this slate and say, where, especially with the undefeateds, and say where could the upset like Illinois and Wisconsin last week happen?
Yeah, this would be one.
The game.
Yeah,
I would think that it might happen.
Yeah. Oh no, I agree. It would be a Penn State looking ahead, Michigan State getting some good bounces. But again, I'm looking at this. I look at Tulsa, Western Michigan, and Northwestern wins, and they are not good. Those are not good football teams. Indiana, not really a good football team, and that was but probably better than the other 3, and that was that was less than 10 points they won at home. Other than that, they've been taken, and the Arizona State game, I mean, could get 0 offense going against Arizona State. I don't know. Every one of these games can go the other way.
Quarterback from Michigan State, Lewerke's been there.
Yep.
And, you expect, I mean, even if they don't have a whole lot of, superstar skill positions, they've got a veteran, experienced guy that's been in the same system.
Yep.
You're not talking about a different system offensively. It's not a complicated system at that. You just figure maybe he'd give you more.
Yeah, this is a disappointing team to me. I agree with you. I feel the way you feel. The proof has not been in the pudding.
No,
that's the problem.
I guess also on the flip side, this also plays into the argument that I was saying potentially the Big Ten being as good overall as a conference as the SEC, because despite being 4-3, that this is a team that can do some damage and ruin people's seasons for those people that are undefeated.
I truthfully, looking at this team in the beginning of the year, like going into the year, I would figure they would have. It was that I watched a lot of this game. That Arizona State game took something out of that team.
Was that a Friday night game?
No, I think it was a Saturday. It was a Saturday. Yeah, but I think it was a midday game or it was a later evening game, because I remember watching it and it was like, it was strange. It just looked like they were lost, and you would expect a Michigan State at home to give them a good game, but offensively they look so inept. And and then I just kind of saw it from there. I don't know. I've never seen this team really kind of get it going, and then obviously taking 2 beatings in a row. This is the type of game where it could be close. Like, don't get me wrong. There's not one game we're talking about right now where I don't think the favored team can lose. And there's some games against some not so good teams on there. It's just because it's that time of year. It's that time of year. You're starting to play teams that know you. You're playing in your conference. We kind of got all those like all around the world games, and now you're playing either a rival or your conference. And so that's where this gets sticky.
Yeah.
But I think Penn State wins this. I think we've talked a lot about what a great coach Franklin is. I think he's got this team focused. Penn State's not always going to be a blow 'em out team. They're just not. That's not the way they're built. It's not the way that they're coached and taught. But they are a good team.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, I had mentioned it before when we were talking about Ohio State facing Big Ten teams and all of it being similar, and even if they run the table and look so good, they may meet something in the playoff that they haven't faced, and it could give them fits.
Yep.
But the one team I said that might be a little different in the Big Ten in that regards because of their athleticism and their speed, that's Penn State.
Yep.
And the fact that Michigan State is, even this year and historically, ground and pound, slow you down, play some really good defense. I just think there's too much athleticism and speed on the Penn State side of the ball. I like what the quarterback for Penn State, what's his name? Clifford's been doing. He looked good last week. Again, we talked about them saying the dimes he threw to what's his head? I can't remember.
Hamlin.
And they
Hamler.
And I responded with, well, they weren't dimes. They were well thrown, and it's not hard to throw those big, deep balls, but he put it up there
Threw it in
enough
the bucket.
so that the kid could run under it. But if in a defense like Michigan State, I don't necessarily think they have the speed in the secondary to mess with that. You get another defense, though, that has some like an Ohio State or like a Clemson or like an LSU with a Grant Delpit. You can't throw those balls up in the sky like that and just let him run under it because the safety is going to also ball hawk and go get it.
Those balls he threw too, those guys had 5 yards on them. And again, it was against a Michigan defense that played pretty well in the game overall.
They're getting better and better every week, Michigan's defense. Unfortunately, their offense is not doing them any favors.
Yeah, Penn State's got to strap it on and play like they've been playing. No, you can't take your foot off the pedal. It's just not that time of year, and teams just don't look at you that way.
Yeah, I think Penn State takes care of it, but like I said a few minutes ago, this could be the game out of this slate if there were to be an upset similar to last week with Wisconsin and Illinois. If I were to have to look down the slate and say, well, that's the one where I think it could possibly happen, then it would be this game.
Yep.
But I still think Penn State takes care of them, and they'll continue on their roll as they will travel. Let's see. Well, this week they're traveling to Michigan State, so then they get to go to the Gophers. And they have to go there.
Yep.
They're undefeated, and we just talked about, it's not going to be that bad this week. But no, they get a week off. They have a bye week.
Oh, is it a bye? Okay.
Because that game is 11-9. So I only say that to say not just do they get a week more to prepare, but it's a week later in the winter where it's going to get even colder in Minnesota. But look, I mean, Penn State, at State College, it does get cold there. Not as cold, but it gets cold there as well. And you mentioned it before. James Franklin loved this guy. Coaching. Then coach names that we talk about that we love and that we highlight are really good coaches that are good men that want to develop young men into
character coaches with character teams.
Husbands, fathers first, contributing members of society, and then football players.
Yep. This next game, I don't know. There's really much to say. Alabama, Arkansas. Arkansas is not good.
Arkansas.
I think Alabama, obviously, the big question is with Tua out. Is there some issues with this?
The Big Mac.
I think
Big Mac Jones.
I think Alabama can do what they need to do on the ground against this team enough to protect their quarterback. I think they're going to be focused. They'll have a good game plan in to help, support the quarterback. And here's the thing. Tua's been throwing the ball over the top, obviously, to this three-headed beast of receivers that they have. Really, it's probably like seven-headed nowadays.
Right.
But the three names we know.
The top three receivers for Alabama have gone down. What are they going to do? Yeah. No problem. Mm-hmm. Tua goes down. Uh-oh.
Yeah. So now this is the thing is about these three receivers, this is what's great for them. They've gone over the top, but these guys can also catch the ball in short yardage and turn it into 50-yard catches. So They don't have to go over the top to get these guys open. And again, their running game showed last week in the second half enough to beat a team like Arkansas. I don't see this one really being much to discuss, as far as how it'll play out. This isn't the game. The question, obviously, that's going to be big is, does Tua get healthy enough for LSU? I think they can devise a game plan against an Arkansas team that is struggling and beat them. I don't see this being the game where they trip up, but I would have said that about Illinois with Wisconsin. But I don't think the thing about this is this wouldn't be a look-ahead game because now they have a little bit of adversity in the sense that Tua's not playing. So I think they're going to be very focused. I think he's gone to that defense and said, look, guys, you're going to have to do your part in this. And he's gone to Najee Harris and say, you're going to tote the rock.
I want to hear.
And that's the way it's going to be. And I think Alabama's got just too many horses in those areas. I don't care that they're freshmen on the defense. They're better than Arkansas.
Well, look, I don't think this will be a problem for Bama either. What I think is more interesting is how they're going to scheme to put Mac Jones in the best position to get the ball in those players' hands. Yes, are they going to be able to be successful running the ball? Because last week when Tua went out, they did have to turn the running game, and we've complained about it all year, but it kind of turned up a little bit and helped them out when they
were able to do it when they needed to.
Right.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And good teams are able to do that. A little note. Coach Chad Morris of the Arkansas Razorbacks had a little comment on preparing to face Mac Jones, and he said, well, I think he's gotten to play in 6 of the last 7 games, so they can look at some of that to, some game tape there to plan a little bit for him. Now, mind you, it was in cleanup time, so not as in critical times, but you still have something to look at. He also said, but if you're a quarterback at Alabama, you're definitely a really, really good football player, and Mac is no different. And that's the dangum truth. He said, we've got our work cut out for us. He's got a great supporting cast around us. And we've got to do a really good job of taking great angles. And when they do get the ball in space, we got to rally to get around them and make tackles. So they know what they have to do. They're not going to be able to do it. Again, I think what's going to be the interesting part of this game is how Mac Jones does, how the coaching staff and Sarkisian, offensive coordinator, schemes and game plans around putting him in the best position to manage this game. I don't think they're going to look for him to win this game for them. They're going to look for him to manage the game for them and allow the other skilled players to win the game for them.
Yep.
And really, quite frankly, whether Tua comes back for the LSU game or doesn't, or comes back and isn't 100%, what if he were to come back and re-injure it and then they're still in the hunt or in the playoff? Then, they have to turn to this kid.
Yeah.
Jalen Hurts is gone, man. The transfer portal has bitten a lot of teams in the behind. Look, I love Chase Bryce, our backup at Clemson, but Kelly's gone, man. If Trevor goes down, I have confidence in Chase because he's been there and done that way more than Mac Jones has for Alabama. But he's not Kelly, and we will take a hit. And there's, look across the board. It's happening everywhere with this transfer portal. So, I guess the whole point of my rant here is that, if Tua isn't 100% or perhaps doesn't get back or does come back and he gets injured again, and they're still in the hunt, it's up to this kid. And it's going to be, time for him to not stand there and hold the clipboard and just be like, hey, there goes Tua, there goes Tua, there goes Tua. I'll get a little time later on. It'll be cool. It's going to be on his shoulders. So how is that going to play itself out?
Yep, definitely. So let's move on to the next game. This one is your big night game.
The third of the 3.
Yeah, it is not. This is not any undefeated teams, but certainly some playoff implications. You got number 8 Notre Dame going to play number 19 Michigan in the Big House. I've not been a big believer and a fan of Michigan throughout the year. I'm mostly because they lost a lot on defense. That was a little bit of a starter, but it's really Shea Patterson and his ability to get that offense moving. I guess what I want to say on the Michigan end is it's probably one of the best games I've seen him play was his comeback ability against Penn State. I thought, in a game that got away from him a little bit early on.
21-0 very quickly.
Yeah, he was able to push him back, and it really came down to tying it up was a drop pass in the end zone. So they really gave Penn State all they could handle, certainly in the second half. And you got a Notre Dame team that they're in a tough position. They got a lot of name. Obviously Notre Dame probably the most famous name in college football historically. not certainly recently, who took a loss to a Georgia team, and probably very deflating for them was the loss Georgia took to South Carolina at this point. But still in there, and their name's gonna, whether we like it or not, is gonna carry weight. They've gotten into the playoff a couple of times and got smoked in a title game, and then got smoked in a semifinal game. So there is some of that, that they've got to look at, but they really, really need to win. And I think in this game, they need to beat Michigan. And I, in some ways, I don't even know how good this would be, but to beat Michigan convincingly. How they win this game, I think, is going to be important to keep them relevant. They're going to need, I think, a fair amount of chaos, though, to happen, which is very possible, as we've talked about. But they're going to need more than I think if there's 4 or 5 one-loss teams, I don't know that their schedule is going to give them the opportunity. And considering the loss they had,
and not having a conference,
not having a conference championship, they may need something like Georgia winning the SEC, which to me is not probably a high probability at this point.
Right. This is one of the bigger games of the day, the third of the 3 that I
believe this is is this the biggest or the most long-standing? They've played the most games again. I know they both were 1 and 2 in most wins in college football history between Notre Dame and Michigan. I think Michigan had passed Notre Dame or vice versa recently. This I think might be one of the longest standing games in history, or most played games in history. But so just a little side tidbit.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, you kind of stole everything I had to say, man. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, look, Michigan's got 2 losses. Don't by any means expect them to get into the playoff, even if they were to run the table and win the Big Ten. That's just it's gonna demolish everybody else, in the Big Ten if that were to happen. But I right now, I don't see any way at 5 and 2 of them creeping in. You said it. There is a minute outside chance that at 5 and 1, if Notre Dame runs the table and only has the 1 loss, if the right things happen with the rest of the country, that they could backdoor their way into this thing even without a conference championship. Simply because they did that loss to Georgia, they actually came out of that game looking better with a loss than Georgia did with a win.
Yeah.
Regardless, we said it when that was happening. That was the Notre Dame shot. They do, to really solidify it. Now it's just, you don't control your own destiny. You could control it in the sense that you got to win the rest of your games, but you still have to hope other things happen and the right things happen to fall into place for them to move or backdoor their way into the championship game. But if Notre Dame loses this game, they're done. They're done. The conversation is completely over. There's not even any, maybe. No, they're done. Okay? 2 losses, no conference championship game. They're finished. And their schedule, though they do have Southern Cal, on the schedule coming up, it's just not, the teams aren't strong enough. Again, we've said it before. That's not necessarily their fault, but they played Southern Cal and won. Stanford, that's who I meant. Stanford they have at the end of the year, who's not that great. But, my point is their schedule is, the teams are playing are not all highly ranked or ranked at all. And, that's typically, regardless of having a championship game, one of the toughest schedules in the country year in and year out. But it's not going to be enough. They lose this game and they're done. So,
and this is where their 5 games, the schedule they set up where they're going to play 5 games against the ACC. This is where the ACC hurts them, and they don't play Clemson or Florida State. Florida State stinks this year, but that's usually the biggest matchup. So I agree.
I mean, this is it. So their back's against the wall, and we'll see how they respond. And I do think the thing that Michigan is good at, and especially has gotten progressively better at, is defense. And they can give. Look, what's the quarterback's name at Notre Dame again?
Lock. Short name 12. Ian Book.
Why am I brain farting? When we just chit chat off,
it does
the mics,
stink in
it
here.
Just slips right out, and then we get on the mic, and I'm like, Ian Book. Good quarterback. not great quarterback. They don't have the Williams kid in the backfield. It's just I say all this because if Michigan's defense, they can give them problems, man. They can give them some problems, and they can't afford it. Notre Dame can't afford it. They can't afford to lose this game if they have any hopes of making of potentially slipping into this playoff picture. They can't afford the loss. So, but it is nonetheless. It is a 7:30 game, and it's the third of the big three this weekend that we're talking about. It's typically a big game. It's a rivalry game, and this one should be just the same. It shouldn't disappoint. Michigan right now sits at 19 in the AP poll. Notre Dame surprisingly is at 8, and I say that surprisingly because Georgia's at like 10, and Georgia beat them. So those are things that always kind of make me go, how do you figure that one? But it's one they can't afford to lose, so it should be exciting. And, like I said, my Clemson games aren't at the same time, but I will be keeping an eye on this one. For the rest of the world that's not Clemson fans, this is going to be the game that all eyes are going to be on at 7:30 Saturday night. Let's move on, my friend.
All right, Boston College, Clemson. I look at this game a lot like the Alabama-Arkansas game. I think Clemson's at home. Here's the thing: is Boston College is a team that can run the ball. Got a very good running back in A.J. Dillon. To me, what the challenge for this Boston College team is, I believe Clemson can go toe-to-toe in the running game with them, with Travis Etienne. So, if that's the case, then you got to start looking at some of the tiebreakers, and it's real simple. It's the fact that Clemson can pass the ball, and regardless of what everybody says about Trevor Lawrence and the passing game so far this year, this is a good passing offense. It's you can sit here and pretend that it's not. Miles ahead of Boston College, and then you got the Clemson defense. And while you may see them get some yards in this game, because I think their running game is strong enough to give Clemson some fits in the run game.
They're ranked number 6 in the country in rush offense, and we're 10.
I just think Clemson can push the score in this game, and by the time you get to the second half, you're gonna I see Boston College's offense having to change from what it's best at. Certainly a game Clemson can't afford to look ahead in any game because we've mentioned all the reasons why, and I don't think they are. I think, you've seen a fiery side of Dabo this year, and I don't think that has anything to do with trying to be, challenging with the, challenging the media, even though I do love that he likes to needle some of the media's opinions, and he's a very charismatic guy when it comes to that. But I think what he's really doing is he knows his team needs to be 100% focused in every game, and he knows that, and he's preparing them not for the rest of the ACC as much as he's preparing them for the playoffs. I think Clemson, they've got some challenges in their game and some things that aren't as good as last year. But, we were listening earlier today, was it Laura Rutledge was talking about it?
Yep.
And I think she was spot on with this. She's like, we really, and especially in the Trevor Lawrence scenario, we really look at this guy and what he did in that title game, and everybody's walking out expecting him to do that in every single game he plays. And that's just, number one, that's unrealistic no matter who you are or how good you are. And I think you saw the same thing with Tua. Tua came out and played that game, and everybody figured, he's just going to run through, everybody the next year. And, here he is. He got hurt. And then they started talking about whether he was tough, and then he got smoked by Clemson.
Yep.
So, this is one of those things that I think they're going to be focused. I just think while Boston College is a very good running game, Clemson can match them toe-to-toe with that alone, and I think everywhere else, Clemson's got a major advantage.
Yeah, I mean, total defense thus far in the season, we are number 5 overall. Boston College is number 116 out of, 132 teams?
Yep.
So that tells a lot, and, they're not explosive enough. I'm confident in my team to be focused, and I'm even more confident in my team to be focused because of what the media is doing to us and the polls.
Mm-hmm.
It's call it disrespect or just it is what it is. We're going to use it as disrespect, and all the chatter about Trevor's bad picks and all that. I mean, I've already seen his posts. Like, that's fine, man. I mean, he's not getting all riled up because that's just not who he is. He's a pretty mellow kid, but he's like, that's fine, man. I mean, like, trash me. I'm just going to go to my coaches and let them lead me where I need to go and just do my best to execute what they have for me the way I should. And, quite frankly, iron out the kinks now because it's just going to get hard. We're not going to look ahead. In the past, I would say, there are games that we have trip-up games, and this could be one to be, nervous about because if they are able to run the ball effectively and keep our offense off the field, well, then, it's just not. No, it's not. No. And there will be a point, and I'm so glad that we haven't seen it yet, where you're going to all of a sudden be like, oh, my goodness, that's the Trevor Lawrence we saw. And our team, I've mentioned it before, coaching staff all the way from springtime where we enter, it's what coach has set up as phases. Phase 1 starts in the weight room before spring practice even begins. The last phase is championship phase, and that starts in November, which we are creeping right up on. So if they don't have them prepared this week in that mode, after we get through this, we go next week, it is all championship phase, and that's where we click on all cylinders, or at least really start to look like we're doing that. So look, I said it a few weeks ago, and this wasn't after what I saw on ESPN, but wouldn't you know, they started putting up the statistics on ESPN with just what I was talking about. And what was that, Dave?
Go ahead, just tell them. Come
on. Deshaun Watson, every year of his career, had the same type of bumps in the roads leading to about this time as Trevor has, and still got it on. Okay, and Trevor even may have performed better this back half of the year than Deshaun ever did, believe it or not. Statistically, when they were showing it, he was above him to this point in the season because Deshaun had his screw-ups too. Mm-hmm. Coaching, ladies and gentlemen, coaching. I'm going to beat the drum.
I got to tell you, though, there is one very, very disturbing thing going on right now out there in the interwebs about Clemson and specifically Trevor Lawrence. Have you seen this TikTok picture?
Is this he met his doppelganger?
Yes.
The female? I saw the thing. I didn't want to look at it. Did he do it in jest?
No.
Oh, it does. Damn. But he's smiling.
No, he did. He goes.
He's laughing
I
about
love it.
See, that's why I like Trevor.
Yeah.
He's not
look
like,
at him.
He's playing along, dude. She does look like me, he said. He's playing along with it. People want to make fun of him for the hair or, girly man hair, sunshine.
Well, let me just say this isn't really making fun of it. Go check this out. I'm trying to share it, but it won't share it to Facebook. But when she turns to the side and smiles, it's friggin' him. It is him. So it's good. It's a good little fun thing. But it's good. It's good that a kid like that, especially given that, social media is a blast on him, that he can have some fun.
Yeah, that he can have a little sense of humor.
This is a kid, actually. I know somebody that, kind of a brother-sister's friend thing that knows him very well and has just said what a down-to-earth, simple, faith, comes from a heavy faith family, but just he's for a kid that's was talked about till no end coming out, is very, very centered and down to earth, and a good guy. So,
that's fun.
Let it see him play, but it is hysterical. I will try to figure out how to share it because and his reaction to it is awesome.
Yeah, it's great. One last little tidbit, and this is more for the Clemson fans because I heard this yesterday on the radio, and one of the highly recruited kids that we took, I believe he was from Kansas? I can't remember. Richard Yergin. He's a defensive lineman. He is now at Boston College. He actually he was highly recruited. He got in a car accident last year that ended his season. He was okay, but we were really worried about him. And then, unfortunately, we have horses on that D-line, and we're deep there, and he felt that he would be better served taking his services elsewhere. Well, he's going to be on the other side of the ball for the Boston College defensive line. So, it's kind of a little interesting thing, a little reunion. Not that he's going to be able to, I think, necessarily give anything to them that is going to cause us problems. But I just thought that for those Clemson fans out there, they know who Yergin is. And, I'm actually happy to see him be able to get on the field and be a starter somewhere. So
Good deal.
pretty cool. All right, we're running long, but let's roll. Cal, Utah. Hit me. This is a late one.
Yeah.
10 p.m. on Saturday.
Again, we talked about this. Like, we are a believer that the Pac-12 has got some noise to make, and these last two games are Pac-12 games. They're late games. Utah has the front row seat to the title game for the Pac-12 South. They're going to take on Cal. Now, Cal does not have a great record this year, but started off, you'll remember, I believe they were 3-0.
Mm-hmm.
If they're going to give this team something to handle, it's going to be defensively. They've had some low-scoring games as a team. I believe Cal beat Washington was their first loss. So for both these next two games, kind of in a different vein, Utah has played a defensive style game this year. They haven't had those 60-point game scoring.
They're number
scoring
4 in the country in total defense.
Yeah, so they're a good defensive team. But they could get into a little bit of a shootout. But this is where these next two games, it's going to be critical for these Pac-12 teams to get some style points to dominate against some teams that can kind of match them a little bit for what they do. Cal's going to be more defensive-minded. If this turns into a 12-7 game, that's not the look. You want to see Utah get 28+, I think, in this game, and then keep Cal pretty low scoring. I believe Utah is starting to get that groove that we were kind of looking for. They were a little in the beginning of the year. The first 3 games, we just weren't really sure about them. So, this is going to be an important one for them to do. They can't turn the ball over because that's one of the ways that Cal has given some teams some fits, gave Washington some fits, is in the turnovers. And this is critical. So these are games maybe you're not staying up for because you might be worn out from 10 straight hours of football, though. You need to check yourself if you are.
Yeah, that's right.
But this is very, very important. Again, driver's seat. You could have, this Utah team going in with 1 loss going into the title game in the Pac-12. And that's, again, with all the chaos that is going to happen, it's a big thing.
Utah is coming off a very big win last week against Arizona State, 21-3. It was in Utah, but it was a big game because that, quite frankly, it was for the Pac-12 South. Utah's in the South, so is Arizona State. They were rolling in with 1 loss as well, and so that game was critical, and they took care of business. Outside of scoring 21 points against Arizona State last week, Utah has scored 52-7 against Oregon State, 38-13 Washington State, They lost 30-23 against Southern Cal. That was the big disappointment. 31-0 against Idaho State, 35-17 against Northern Illinois, 30-12 against BYU. So, they're really putting up 30 points a game, and that's
right.
The reason
but if you take those first 3 games, it wasn't as explosive as it's gotten. That's why we said they're finding their groove.
But this is a defensive-minded team behind a defensive-minded coach, and they're obviously, with being number 4 in total defense to this point in the season, they're performing to that level on that side of the ball.
Hitting their stride.
It's the other side of the ball that, you may not really have seen it, because it might have been slow and go, but when all's said and done and the smoke clears, they're popping off roughly 30 a game offensively, which I feel like that Utah team offensively hasn't done things like that since the Alex Smith era.
Yep.
Okay, that's when they were more of like, wow, they can put some points on the board. Utah can.
Back in your Herbenmeyer and post-Herbenmeyer.
Yeah, that balance is going to be very important. Now, Utah still has to go to Washington next week and take them on. But that balance is very important, and I think that, that's going to carry them through the rest of the season. I hope so, and I hope Oregon, who still does have some games to play, we'll talk about them next, does the same, because that's going to make for a big, fun clash in the Pac-12 championship game and really give one of those teams an opportunity to get into the playoffs should things shake out right.
Yeah, and just understand, this is what I was saying is, you got Cal that's 20th in the country in points allowed per game, 48th in yards allowed per game, but they've been a defensive-minded team, but they don't have the offense. So I think you get a Utah team that scores north of 28 and keeps them to 10 or less. Is a very good showing. I'm not saying it has to specifically be that, but it's a very good showing.
Yeah, and look, I just said hopefully that Utah and Oregon both handle their business the rest of the way. they need to handle their business if they want to get in the playoffs.
Absolutely.
Both of them need to be going into that Pac-12 with a 1 loss on their resume in order for the winner of that game to come out with a shot at the playoff. Because if one of them slips up, it's really going to weaken
their
the
title
potential
game
for them to slip in. If it's another 1-loss team, it's like them or them.
Yep.
So we'll see. I'm excited about that one as well because I like being able to watch the end of those 7:00 games, get started on those late games, and then maybe crawl into bed and pop it on and watch all the way through to the end. Or if it's already game over by the end of the third, fall asleep and have the little sleep timer on. Sweet dreams of college football. Last game on the slate. And then we just want to jump into a couple quick conversations about, the playoff picture with some of these teams. Washington State, our man Mike Leach, not having the season I would expect, especially after coming off last year winning the Pac-12. Still, they let me see here. I just want to take a quick gander. Offensively, they are Washington State is number 4 in total offense this year.
And number 1 in passing, going over almost 450 yards a game.
And that's what they do, man. That is the mad scientist. So Washington State is traveling to Oregon to take on the Ducks, who sit at number 11, coming off a nice win last week against Washington. Really a good game. Really a great game for both the quarterbacks to see them be able to perform, not having turnovers or screw-ups and just going toe-to-toe at a very high level and doing what they need to do, not just for where they are for their team in college, but these are 2 guys that are slated as top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL draft next year. So it was nice to see them go out without like a blemish in that game, rather just fighting.
Yep. Yeah.
So is there a letdown to be had because you can't, you can't take Washington State for granted, the mad scientist.
I think, here's my thing is what I've liked about Oregon is they had every reason to kind of have letdowns so far this year. And a perfect example was the Washington game last week where they were having to come back in that game and could have just kind of laid down. Now this is kind of going to be the fun part. You've got the number 4, offense in total yards per game going against the number 16 yards per game allowed defense. And that took a little bit of a hit last week, meaning they were higher than that.
Yep.
Prior to that, they were the number 3 points.
To Eason, man.
Yeah, and against a Washington team that played really well. Eason played well. The whole team played well. That was I think that, again, maybe you just look at it from statistics and go, Washington's lost a few games and they're in the bottom end of the top 25. But if you watch that game, Washington played really well, and Oregon, and there was a reason why Washington was higher ranked coming into this year. So, I think that was a very good win. So that'll kind of be the big matchup. But where I think this really gets decided is you've got a Washington State team that's in the below 100, so 104th in yards in yards allowed per game versus an Oregon team that's 26th. I just think that's going to be too much for them to overcome. The fun part will be in this game is that because they're so pass heavy in the Washington State is that it's not like they have to change their game plan if they get behind. So it allows them kind of just to play the way they're going to play all the way through this game. It'll be interesting to see the chess match with Oregon to see what they do to stop the defense. Certainly you want to get pressure, but you're going to have to man up because they sling it and they throw it fast a lot of times. And so again, this is kind of, I said, like the Cal-Utah is a defensive type of game. This is kind of going to be a battle of offenses to see how they handle it. I just think the fact that Oregon has such a strong defense is the deciding factor in this. But you can never count out the mad scientist.
No, you can't. No, you can't. And, look, for me, it goes back to something we spoke on first game of the year for Oregon. And they continue to ring true with it. They have a very good veteran offensive line. And if Washington State's defense is just not so much, they're going to control the ball. Whereas on the other side of the ball, you got a guy like what's his name? Austin Falu. You got Jordan Scott, and then you got the freshman Kayvon Thibodeau. They're going to be coming off the edges. Washington State throws the ball. So you can best believe the majority of the time they're not looking to stop a run. They're going to pin their ears back and send those edge rushers nonstop at the quarterback for Washington State, Gordon.
Yeah, I think really, and the way you're going to beat, you talk about the edges, but I think the real way that you're going to beat a Mike Leach team is you've got to push the middle of the pocket.
Yes.
You don't want him stepping up and getting throwing lanes on slants and those kind of routes, because that's kind of where that track meet starts with them. So it's sometimes you may, you got to set a little bit of an edge but get that push up the middle, which I definitely think that Oregon can do. May even seeing a little blitzing from Dye because he's a beast and he's quick.
Yep.
So, that's going to kind of be the interesting thing. This is definitely, Mike Leach is good at the chess game, but the thing that I like about Oregon too, on top of that, when you just go offense for offense, is they can get balanced.
Yep.
You can't with Washington State. So
and they have more than one running back to get balanced.
Right.
It's been the Verdell show in the backfield most of the season, but we saw last week, he was doing all right, but the guy that was really helping him out of the backfield further, also because he can catch the ball, I think he's a little more of the pass catching back, is the Habibi Lakio kid.
Yep.
So they've got a mix a bag of backs back there. They can hit you whichever way if you're able to stop the traditional running style, but you're not so good at stopping that guy that can get out and catch a ball, or they send him out into space. They'll switch it up, and then you got the man, Justin Herbert, behind that veteran offensive line. But you're right. You can't. There always seems to be a game every year that Washington, let me not just say Washington State, Mike Leach, even when he was at Texas Tech, pulls off a win that wasn't expected.
Yep.
I don't expect it, but it's going to be a good game. This is a 10:30 game, so this is the one. I will look a little at that Cal-Utah game, but then when 10:30 hits, I'll flip over because I enjoy watching Oregon. I've loved on them a lot. I loved on Justin Herbert. I've loved on their head coach, and I just like the team. I think they're another team that I think you could slowly start to look at as being. They have some pieces you can say they're pretty complete in a lot of areas.
Yep.
Not maybe 100%, but we've had our stumbles as Clemson. Alabama's had them. LSU's had them, letting their defense that's so supposed to be the one of the best defenses in the country, letting points get scored on them, and so everybody has to kind of develop as time goes on. And I think Oregon has developed very nicely to this point in the season and looking more and more complete as we go. So
yeah, and then think about this. Oregon, say they win this game and they win it convincingly enough. What if Auburn beats LSU? What does Oregon look like then?
Yeah, man.
What if LSU goes to like 6 or 7? How do you not have Oregon right there next to them?
Crazy.
So it all starts to get interesting. So probably I want to try this real quick, and we'll be brief about it, but we're going to wrap up and just talk about who the players are in the title games, and what we're seeing. Again, a lot of these teams have to play each other, but we kind of just want to talk about some of the matchups. Starting out, I'll kind of lead off, and when you can probably take the next conference
by conference.
Yep, you got the Big Ten right now. It really is a four-headed monster, and anyone can do it. You've got in the East, it's Penn State and Ohio State. Again, Penn State has to play Minnesota, and also has to play Ohio State. So in the West, you got Minnesota and Wisconsin. I just mentioned Minnesota's got to play Penn State. Wisconsin has to play Ohio State, which we've already talked about as well. So a lot of these guys got to play each other, but you're talking about all but Wisconsin is undefeated. So, and Wisconsin obviously being undefeated controls their destiny with Ohio State, Minnesota. They got to play them.
Iowa still.
Yep. And Iowa can play a spoiler in all of this.
I mean, that's just, and we're not saying Iowa in the sense that they're in the hunt, but just a spoiler out of the division.
Yeah. So there's a lot left to be played again. There's in some mixture or another. Every one of these teams has to play 2 out of the 3 teams that are that we've just discussed. So that's kind of where we see the Big Ten. So that'll be interesting. Again, that means that there's just going to be another heavyweight title fight to be played at the end of this year. So you want to take on another conference here and kind of give us a little.
Yeah, let's hit the Big 12. You got
right.
Baylor. Of course, they're undefeated.
Now, mind you, there's no division split in the Big 12, which is unique. It's the top 2 teams.
Yeah, the top 2 teams will play in the Big 12 championship game. So you got right now at the top, you got Baylor and Oklahoma because they're undefeated. So if that continues down the path that we've seen, then it'll be.
But they are yet to play each other.
Yeah, those 2 teams do still have to play each other. Unfortunately, how many? Let's see. Texas has 2 losses, but I think only 1 in conference, right? So
the other one's LSU, right?
So Texas is sitting they're chomping at the bit with the 1 loss, and they'll have opportunities to better their resume moving forward, and potentially at the end of the day, because Baylor and Oklahoma do still have to play, they could be sitting there, Oklahoma, Oklahoma. Looking at their schedule moving ahead, they take on, as we said, Kansas State this weekend, and then they get Iowa State coming to town. Look, Iowa State's given some big teams problems in the past. They were looked at as potentially a team in the Big 10 or the Big 12 that could maybe make a run. They have a couple losses. I think they have 2 losses. But
Iowa and to Baylor. So.
Yeah, so they're 2 good teams now, but they've handled their business, and Matt Campbell's a good coach, and he's going to have them prepared for that Oklahoma game. Understand that is their Super Bowl.
Yeah,
okay?
Understand they got 2 losses to 1 undefeated team, one team with 2 losses, but those 2 losses in a combined 3 points.
Yeah, so Iowa State is surprisingly still in the mix in this thing, because the week after they go to Norman to take Oklahoma on, then they get to go home and they get Texas. So both that Texas and Iowa still have a shot at squeezing up to that second slot in the Big 12 and taking on what we assume will be Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship game. How about the ACC, brother? Why don't you hit us?
Well, we've got in the Atlantic. Clemson is undefeated at this point. Wake Forest has 1 loss in conference.
And we still have to play.
Yeah, they still have to play.
Not that I think we'll lose, but, look, if we were to slip up there, then that puts Wake
in the driver's seat.
They put them in the driver's seat.
I think the critical part for the ACC to and to help Clemson, I'm going to put Clemson in there, but yes, it could be Wake Forest. But I think at that point, you're not talking about any playoff potential. You've got Virginia and Pitt right now, each with 1 loss. They're in the conference. They are 2-loss teams. You got Virginia Tech with 2 losses in the conference, but are also a 2-loss team. I think the critical part is we need UVA and Pitt, who have already played in UVA 1, to run out so we can end up with a stronger showing. That's been a struggle for the ACC, is in the Coastal to have a team. I think what you had the 1 year where we had North Carolina that had 2 losses going in, or 1 loss going in. I think they lost the conference game and then lost the bowl game.
Yep. We had the other year where we had a 1-loss Miami. They were undefeated until the week prior to the ACC championship game. Then they lost, and then we played them, and then we beat the snot out of them.
Yeah, we've not really we haven't had a 1-loss team versus a 1-loss team, or a 1-loss team versus an undefeated team. I think really since we've had the conference title, and most of that's obviously been from the Coastal, as Clemson's been handling their business, and when not Clemson, it's been Florida State. Mm-hmm. So, we're really looking for those teams to push. You still have UNC, Duke, and I mentioned Virginia Tech with 2 losses within the conference. So if Pitt and UVA stumble, there's probably 5 teams that have a legitimate shot left to do it. It doesn't look good overall, but we really probably from a conference standpoint, the ACC needs UVA and Pitt to run out in this in order to make it probably the most competitive and probably the ability to have a ranked team playing Clemson in that title game.
Yep. Let's bounce over to the Pac-12. Of course, they are split up into a North and South right now. You got Oregon, who has 1 loss, but that's out of conference. They're sitting undefeated in the conference. You have, what is that, Oregon
State? Oregon State only has 2 conference losses.
Wow. But, they do sit at number 2 in the conference, ahead of Washington, only because of that game last week.
Utah, right now, as we already mentioned when we talked about it, the class of the Pac-12 really looks to be Utah and Oregon, and the ideal for that conference is for those teams to win out.
Yep. I mean, you have USC surprisingly sitting there at number 2 with 1 loss in the conference. Even though their record is 4-3 overall, they're 3-1 in the conference. You've got UCLA. They're 2-5, but they're 2-2 in the conference.
Yep.
It's craziness. Of course, Arizona State we spoke about. That loss last week to Utah really puts them on the outside looking in. And you got Arizona, who is 4-3 overall, 2-2 in the conference. So they're on the outside looking in, but they could make some noise. Don't know if they will. Just not seeing the consistency out of that team historically, and surprising this year, but we'll see if that continues the pace. But you said it, man. We need to see, for everyone. I think it'd be a lot of fun to see Oregon and Utah continue winning out, go to the championship game, and have a big clash to really, give themselves an opportunity to get a bid to the playoff.
Yeah,
hit us with the SEC.
Interestingly, like in the we all know about UF has had a resurgence this year and has looked very good. They obviously lost a game in conference to LSU, so that's not a bad loss whatsoever. UGA had a hard hit. After beating a team like Notre Dame, their schedule is not the strongest schedule, at least not so far. And UGA went out and lost to South Carolina. But interestingly, we throw this in there that Mizzou only has 1 loss in conference too as well.
And that was to Vandy last week, which is just poo-poo.
Yeah, the benefit to UF is they would win. Again, these teams have to play each other, but they would win at this point the tiebreaker only because they lost to the West, so they would have the lead in the East. But what is it? It's next week, right? Is it next week? I'm trying to think what date we're on. Yeah, it's next week. Next week
cocktail party
is the cocktail party. UF, UGA,
both Georgia and Florida are on a bye this week.
Yep. So they'll be getting going to get that played, and then in the West, it's a 3-headed monster. We've already kind of touched on it. You've got Alabama, LSU, and Auburn. All yet to play each other. Obviously, you're getting LSU, Auburn. Auburn's got 1 loss in the conference.
Yep.
So you've got that right now, which they lost to Florida, right? So
on the other side.
So you're going to see some chaos. But right now,
you know what's funny to me? I'm looking at the current standings of the SEC West. It has LSU, Alabama, Auburn. It doesn't say like 1, 2, 3, but that's how it's listed. So I'm just kind of assuming that. But, both Alabama and LSU are 7-0 overall. But in conference, LSU's 3-0, but Alabama's 4-0. It's kind of curious why they're not ahead of LSU just based on mere records, because that's what these standings are. They're not looking at eye test.
Yeah, I don't know. The great part is they all play each other. And we don't have that many weeks left, so it's all going to happen fast.
The funness. Yep. Funness. I like funness. So, good stuff, buddy. I like it. This was a lengthy one. They have been, but, man, we're going to edit ourselves as need be because we enjoy this, and I don't think that we ramble on too much on nonsense. I think everything we're presenting you is some fun stuff, some really critical statistical views as well as eye test views on these teams and these games, but also a little bit of our personal input. So, deal with it. You better listen. I appreciate you, my man. We will enjoy this weekend's games, get this out and up as soon as we can. Hopefully, a lot of what we talked about falls into place, and maybe some that don't. So it's even more fun to talk about next week in the recap. Enjoy the games. We appreciate you listening as always. We will see you on the gridiron. Have a good day.